Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Divine, and today we're going to be taking a look at 25 things you should know before playing New World. Alright, so first up is going to be utilizing the trading post as your own personal storage shed. Now, what you can do is you're going to actually need quite a bit of money for this method, but you can actually place items very high up in the trading post and then actually change it to like 14 or 28 days, which you're going to pay a lot for listing fees. And then you would have to move the price up high enough where you know it's not going to sell. So these are things that you can do, and you can also have 100 of these orders in every city's trading post at any given time. So it's just kind of a cheap way if you need to have some stuff in storage, at least maybe for a day or two while you burn through some other materials. All right, so moving on to tip number 2, and that is going to be if an enemy's level has a skull in it, that means they are 10 or higher levels than you are. And it also means that their aggression window is at its maximum. So even if you don't think you're very close to an enemy, it still might aggro. So just be aware if you're in higher level areas and trying to get somewhere that even if you think you're far away, you might not be far enough. Alright, so moving on to tip number 3, and we're going to be going over gems. Now, if you want to get up your stone cutting, and it's kind of an easy way to do this, you do burn moats and everything like that used a fire moat, this will use an earth moat, and those are totally fine. You can always sell cut moats on the auction house, but there are a few gems that you probably want to be aware of, and the biggest one was going to be that first one, which is the carnelian gem, and that is actually used for taunting. So don't just willingly burn all these gems on different silly jewelry or anything like that. Things like the carnelian are required by tanks so that they can generate more threat, and they probably will always sell very well in the auction house. So just be aware of that before you utilize the next gem in a crafting material that you might just throw away. Alright, so for my next tip, and this is one that I have not seen many people cover, which is awesome because I really enjoy this, and this is going to be utilizing weapon abilities to get yourself across the water faster. Now, things like the rapier or the great axe to get across the water really quickly, you can utilize this to actually get away from PvPers, or if you're just harvesting or something like that, these abilities can allow you to kind of go back and forth over these rivers really quickly without any kind of issue. I would also say though, if you're trying to do like some PvP and you end up getting into like a skirmish around a river or something like that, and you have these abilities, utilize them. Throw them over on the other side of the river. You know, you can freeze them, slow them down if you have a ranged weapon, which it would pair perfectly with that. And then you can see here I have the great axe, and you want to get it right before you like are walking super slow. And that'll allow you to use the weapon ability. You can also roll before doing it to get across even further rivers. So it's just another thing that you can use as part of your skills or in your battle strategy. Alright, so tip number 5 is going to be aggroing enemies with lower level players between you and the enemy. Now, this is kind of a dick move, I would say. But what you can see here is I aggroed that wolf, and he actually didn't run towards me. He ran towards the lowest person that was closest to him. And I've utilized this a couple different times, just testing it out. And I usually kill the monster for these people, especially if they're low level. But one time I did use it to actually be kind of a jerk and mine some ore, because I just had the animal attack the person so I could get the ore. But they were on the opposing faction and PvP was enabled in that time, so I didn't feel too bad. So it's just things to think about and tactics you can use. Alright, so tip number 6, and not everyone knows this just yet, but the town board missions where you have to go hunt things or gather things. I've seen a few people that were confused by this, and you do not have to be in the territory of where you got this town project. So if you get 4 different missions to hunt rabbits in all sorts of different territories, you can go to the place where you know there's the most rabbits and just farm all of the town projects until they're complete. So I just wanted to put that out there for some people that weren't quite aware. I know a lot of you guys probably already do, but at least now it's out there. Alright, so moving on to tip number 7, and that is going to be utilizing spirit shrines instead of going to the cities themselves. Now, it's going to get expensive if you have a lot of weight on yourself, or maybe you don't have enough Aezoth, but if you find some of these spirit shrines around the world, as we can see, they can kind of cover a good chunk of distance while not burning all of your Aezoth in the process. So just be aware of these. Go find them if you can. I would recommend that you find find them in each territory, especially if you're doing a lot of questing. It can cut down time if you have a lot of Aezoth, but it's just another thing to think about. Alright, so tip number 8 is going to be utilizing and gathering everything you can along the way while maybe you're in between quests, or if you're out gathering a certain material, it might make more sense to gather other items that you see along the way. Now, I know not everybody's going to do this because they think, oh, my inventory is going to fill up too fast, but I would highly recommend doing this because that way you have all these materials in your bank when you go to do more advanced recipes or quests that require certain materials in particular. Alright, so tip number 9, and that is going to be, while you're doing the Watchtower quest line, make all 4 tools. Do not just stop at the skinny knife. It is very important because a lot of these materials around this area, a lot of people are just going to go rush through the quest. They're not going to bother to get those 3 other tools, and there might be a lot of materials that you can gather along the way and early on that many people are going to be able to be missing on because they didn't make these other tools. So just an important tip, guys. Alright, so moving on to tip number 10, and that is if you have materials and you're going to, upgrade them. So we have coarse leather here. We're going to think about upgrading to rugged leather. Do not upgrade every single piece. Have some of the base materials left over. And you should do this because when you do the town board missions, there are missions where you have to make armor, or weapons or anything like that, and they typically like to start off using those base materials. So if you don't have any of them, you're gonna have to go out there and gather more. So it's just better to have a little extra just sitting in the bank somewhere that you aren't upgrading all the time. Alright, so up next is going to be using Aezoth extraction on your tools as a perk, and this is going to give you the chance to get 1 Aezoth per item that you gather, so it can be very beneficial. Now, if you are a little bit higher, the better way of doing this is going to ancient temples and actually just farming those, because those monsters have the chance, or a higher chance I think, of dropping 10 Aezoth per kill. And if you're pretty high up there, you can just sit up in a ledge or something like that, shoot them with a bow or a gun from far away and get quite a bit of Aezoth very fast. But if you are lower level, Aezoth extraction perk is a good second. Now moving on to tip number 12, and this is the first thing I'm going to do when I get into the game. After you reach your main city, my first goal is going to be making iron tools. Now you need to be level 5 to wield them, and you're also going to need 152 iron ore, 88 greenwood, 36 rawhide, and 8 fiber. But let me tell you guys, it's well worth it. And if you're playing early on in the game's release, it can be an extra good money maker, but these prices will plummet pretty quickly, and then steel will take its place. So just kind of be aware of that. Alright, so tip number 13 is actually going to be utilizing the auction house again, but this time we can actually put items in the auction house to move them to a different territory if we want. So when you cancel an auction in another territory that was posted on a different territory's trading post, it goes straight to your inventory. So you could actually post a lot of like different raw materials or things like that, especially if you're doing maybe like the town board missions or anything like that. You could go in there and just cancel your auction and have the mats straight to you. So it's kind of a cheap way to kind of transfer them, especially if your faction doesn't own a bunch of the different territories. Alright, so tip number 14 is going to be going over Fey Iron and Petrified Wood. Now, I would not recommend you guys burn all your time trying to find these materials. Now, if you want to have, the glorification that you achieved to build some of these items, I mean, go all for it. Me personally, the items that you get from these materials, and they're so hard to find these materials, it's not worth it. I will out-level them before I ever get the materials to make these weapons or armor, so just be aware of that as you move on throughout your levels. Alright, so tip number 15, and this is kind of going in hand with my recent video on housing, but a lot of people have said like how they want to, wait to get the tier 4 houses or anything like that to get them cheap. Just note that you do need to work on your territory standing. Now, this is something that people do forget, and it does take a while, so think about how long you want to spend getting your territory standing rather than not having that extra teleport. Alright, so tip number 16, and that is going to be the XP gain territory standing card buff. Now, one thing people don't tend to mention is that this card does not affect your skill XP. So that was the reason initially I was like, why is everybody so against this? That is your reason. You only gain combat XP, weapons XP, and I think quest XP from this bonus. So after you hit 60, it is pretty useless. I really hope Amazon changes this to affect different skills as well, but we'll see in time, I guess. So moving straight into tip number 17, and those of you that didn't play open beta or maybe haven't played the game yet and know about fishing hotspots, please note that you do not unlock these hotspots until you get the proper fishing level. So this is a small change. A lot of people used to know where the hotspots were, and you could just run to them. That is not the case anymore. You do need the proper level before you are able to fish in them. Alright, so tip number 18 is going to be collecting different town resources and freebies. These are all going to have a cooldown of 1 hour. Supply caches and crates and stockpiles all have a cooldown of 1 hour. And your faction supply cart in each town. Now that cooldown is 24 hours, so just be aware of that, guys. Alright, so tip number 19, and that is going to go over weapon respecing. Now, just one thing to note, early on you're going to get free respecing on your weapons, and that's not going to be a problem. It's when it changes over to cost Aezoth that it can kind of sneak up on you when you're not ready. So if you're constantly flipping your spec around, just be aware that it might end up costing you some Aezoth later on. Alright, so tip number 20, and that is going to be, just note that you guys can send money to anyone from anywhere, so you do not have to be in the city to do so. So it's nice if your guild is trying to buy a territory or you need to send money to a friend or something like that, just aware that you can send it from anywhere you like. Alright, so tip number 21 is you can use a lot of different foods that you don't think are foods as food to heal yourself, and that includes honey, water, milk, raw meat, and you can also equip these in your hotbar as well to reduce the weight of these items in your storage on your person. And then moving on to tip number 22, which is a quickie, that is regen potions, which regen and give you health and mana. And health potions or mana potions all share different cooldown timers, so you don't have to worry about them overlapping each other or anything like that. Now tip number 23, and that is going to be utilizing weapon coatings when you're going into dungeons. Now each dungeon's probably going to have a certain type of mob type, and you can utilize some of these different weapon coatings to actually deal more damage. Now it's not a whole lot of damage, but it is beneficial, especially if you're trying to just get skills up and you have extra mats that you can create. These, they're just like a good secondary thing to just bring along with you during a dungeon run. Alright, so moving on to tip number 24, and unfortunately my video clip got corrupted of this one, which really sucks because I was hoping to show you guys, and that is laying down into grass hides your name from pursuing PvPers. So if you are getting chased and you get a little bit of a gap and can hide up in some rocks, you can lay down and your name will no longer show up if they try to mouse over you. Alright, so for tip number 25 is going to require you be flagged for PvP, but if you go into a fort, you can actually have training dummies to test on. Now, these can be useful, especially if you want to try out some different, moves or anything like that, and you're worried about enemies running around, or if you don't have someone to duel or anything like that, so use them when you need them. Alright, so that is my 25 things I think you should know in New World. Now, if you like this video, think about hitting that subscribe button. It really does help me out. And if you like the video, think about giving that a like as well. And I will see you guys in the next one.